Hi there, my name is Pat Fader. I am an instructor at Milwaukee Area Technical College, and I'm going to run through how you can create a Windows 10 virtual machine in VMware Workstation. I will show you a couple different ways of doing it. So with that, how did I prepare to get ready to do this? I had to first go to our Microsoft DreamSpark site and download a copy of Windows 10. So I downloaded a 64-bit copy of Windows 10. If we take a look at it, here it is. So it's on my D drive. So with that, let's get started and create a VM in VMware Workstation. Go File, New Virtual Machine. I'll do the typical one first, and we'll look at the custom second. So I'm installing Windows 10. I can either, if I have a physical DVD with Windows 10 on it, I could create a VM from that. If I have an ISO image, that's what I just downloaded. I could use that, or I could just procrastinate and say I'll do it later. But let's and actually I do want to show this method as well. So let's install first in the easiest off the Windows 10 ISO. Also, it says that this operating system will use easy install. What is this? Essentially, it's going to ask me a few questions at the beginning of the installation. I can hit next, 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 and just kind of walk away and come back, and I'll have a copy of Windows 10 when I get back. So a little bit different than if you install off of physical media onto actual physical, onto an actual real computer. So that's when I do it this other way here, install an OS later, well, that most closely resembles what you would see if you were installing on a physical machine. Next, I don't have to put a product key in. We can worry about that later. I actually think that, like Windows 7, Windows 10 will just keep running without a product key. At least that's my assumption at the time of this recording. So I created an administrator account and put a password in. That's fine, no product key. It's good. What do I want to call? What do I want to call the machine? Well, let's call it, Windows 10 Easy Install. We'll put it on my D drive. I think it runs a little bit faster when you're on a separate hard disk, or the best is an SSD drive. So my virtual machine is going to go in this folder here, Windows 10 Easy Install. Next, my virtual machine will have a disk that can grow up to be 60 gigabytes in size. So it could take up to 60 gigabytes of space on my host computer, and that 60 gigabytes at this point will just be sliced up, and I believe in a bunch of 2 gigabyte size files. The reason you select this is that sometimes it makes it easier if you're copying your virtual machine to media, to like a USB drive or something like that. Some removable media work better with a smaller disk size or file size. It really depends on the type of file system that you put on your USB disk stick. Next, we can take a quick look at the hardware, and what I want to point out is you can change how much RAM is assigned to your virtual machine. So we'll go with 4 gigabytes. My host computer has 16, so I can easily run 4 at one time. You can control how your network adapter is configured. It can be bridged, which means connected directly to my physical network. So if I'm at home right now, or if I'm at work, if I pick bridged, IT is going to see one more Windows 10 machine show up all magically on their network. NAT, what NAT does, that actually puts a virtual router in between your host computer's network and the network that your virtual machine is running on. It still gets internet access, but it's just there's a virtual router in between that, and you'll learn in other classes that there's an advantage to having that router there. Or you can say I want this machine to be in a private network. This machine cannot have internet access, and you can change this whenever you want, but that's just at the beginning. You just choose your settings. I'll say host only. Oh, and then on the left here, you can also see that you can add more. I could hit the add button, and I could add another process, or I could add another network card if I want a dual NICs. Once the machine is up and running, once the machine's been configured, I could actually come back to the same screen, hit the add button, and add additional hard disks too if I wanted to. Close and finish. and that's pretty anticlimactic, right? So basically, it's chunking through. If we let it sit for a little bit, I'm going to have a Windows 10 machine. I did that already, and 10, 15 minutes later, you're going to end up with a machine that has Windows 10 on it. This is a good point to mention one other thing that'll happen. It's actually right here too. Click Finish to create the virtual machine and start installing Windows 10, and then VMware Tools. What are VMware Tools? They VMware Tools makes a virtual machine run a lot smoother. It does things like it adds a better graphics driver that works well with VMware Workstation. It allows you to drag and drop files between your host computers, like desktop, and the virtual machine's desktop, so you can share files back and forth really easy. It does time synchronization with the host computer, so basically VMware Workstation is saying, like it or not, you pick the easy install, you're going to get VMware Tools as well, and that's what you want. So I can stop. Well, actually, I guess we can let this install kind of run, and while this is going, let's make another machine. No, I can't. I have to let this finish up. I'm going to hit the cancel button, and we'll go through a second install. All right, so that's one way of creating a virtual machine, and get out of there. There we go. And if we would have done that, we would have ended up with a machine like this here. I'll start it up real quick. Okay, so the machine, after the install, you end up with this, and you have actual, Windows 10 computer. VMware Tools are installed, so you can drag and drop files between the host, desktop, and this one. You can also, it's kind of cool if you ever like rechange your, if you change your window size. Let's see here. Make it a bit smaller. So right now you're like, well, this kind of stinks, Pat. I've got my start buttons on the bottom here. Since VMware Tools are installed, I can do things like VM View Fit Guest Now. And it resizes the desktop to fit whatever window you're operating in. So this is a really nice, with VMware Tools installed, Fit Guest Now. We have some nice features there. All right. Instead of shutting them, oh here, actually, I keep thinking of all these extra things I want to add. Now that my machine has been configured, and before I start playing around and really messing it up, you might want to consider I'm having a hard time this afternoon taking a snapshot. So if I take a snapshot 1, I'll just call this clean install. Okay. So now no matter what I do, how bad I mess my computer up, I can always go to my snapshot manager, go back in time, go back to the way it was at 3:23 on April 27th, go to, and all changes have been rolled back. The OS's state has been rolled back. Now I took this snapshot with my VM running. You can also take snapshots, and I actually prefer it to take snapshots with your machine shut down. Virtual machines are hardware. They do work well between different host computers, but they work better if they are shut down before you take it from one machine to another. So the best way to do that is go power, shut down guest, shut it down. Okay. Once it's down, I should probably take a snapshot then instead. That's it. That's one install. Let's do the next way. Let's see here. File, new virtual machine. Let's go with the custom. Sounds so exciting, right? All right, so you can pick your hardware compatibility. I want this virtual machine to be compatible with Workstation 12, and it's backwards compatible. Next. Let's again choose that this will be we'll install from an ISO, our Windows 10 ISO. Let's again skip the product key, and this will be pick admin again. So again, this is something that VMware is doing for us. It's with this easy install. It's actually gonna present answers to the different install questions for us as our Windows 10 machine boots up off the ISO and goes through a typical installation. Every OS, I feel like they've made it easier and easier to install. So this easy install is great, but it's not like it saves you that much time. I do like the fact though that it does install the VMware tools for you automatically. Okay, once again we have to choose where it's going to go. D drive is good. Make a new folder. Windows 10 Advanced Install. I don't know if I mentioned it, but when I downloaded Windows 10, I did download the 64-bit copy. So typically you're going to want to go with 64-bit versions of OSs. They can handle more memory. They're actually a little more secure. There's really not much of a reason to ever use a 32-bit installation unless you have some really outdated hardware. So Windows 10, I'll say x64, indicating it's 64-bit. And this is our advanced install. Well, actually, it's fine. Let's keep it like this. Good enough. Well, it looks like I messed up a little bit here. It's going to go in our folder called new folder. It's fine. Okay, BIOS or EFI. So what we're doing here is we're saying what kind of firmware is our virtual machine going to be presented. BIOS is kind of the way it has always been. EFI is a newer type of firmware. Why would you pick EFI? I guess, I mean, it is less mature. I feel like VMware's product is a lot more wrung out with BIOS, but you could choose EFI if you wanted to give this virtual machine the ability to boot off a USB drive. So I haven't mentioned it, but you can always plug in USB sticks into your host computer and then have those mapped to your VM. So if you wanted to try booting off a USB drive, you would choose the EFI BIOS. I can't think of anything else, any other reasons to do it, unless I guess you just wanted to play with the whole EFI firmware. Okay, so I'll stick with the BIOS here. I'll go with one processor. I will go with 8 gigabytes of RAM for my VM. As far as the network adapter goes, we talked about all these already, so I'm just going to go with host only. You can pick the type of disk controller, IDE, SCSI, or SATA, or disk rather. I'll just go with the recommended SCSI. This is kind of cool. Under the in more advanced settings, you can choose if you want to use an existing virtual hard disk. So perhaps maybe I'm bringing just the hard disk file and not the setting file over from a different machine. I could say use that existing hard disk, or I could even map a virtual machine directly to a physical disk. So these are things that you do more in an enterprise environment with VMware server product, but they're giving us those same options at the consumer level as well. So make a new disk. 60 gigabytes is good. Do not hit this checkbox. If you do, you just sucked up 60 gigabytes of space off your host computer. So that just says on the front end, reserve all the hard, just have your hard disk file, as opposed to having it be dynamic and grow as your virtual machine grows. You hit this and your hard disk file is just automatically 60 gigabytes. We'll split it into multiple disk files again. And next. Customize hardware, the same settings as before. Yep, host only. I'm just picking host only for a couple of reasons. One is if I ever do let the machine boot all the way up, I don't want to have to wait for it to do Windows updates, and I just feel it's safer to have your VM start up as host only, and then you can intentionally give them internet access if you want to. So done. Let's let it boot up. Actually, let's not. Let's go on to the third way of creating a VM, because at this point, it's going to be pretty much identical to the previous install. I don't think you might have one or two prompts at the end of the installation, but for the most part, it's pretty self-explanatory. So we're done. Windows 10 is installed. The last one. Finish. Cancel. The last way, new virtual machine, we can pick typical. But what I wanted to show is I will install the OS later. This will not take advantage of the easy install. So we will see more of what you would expect to see on a physical computer during the installation process. It does help to tell what type of OS you're going to install. So this is Windows 10 64. This will do things like it can configure the BIOS for us, or optimize the BIOS, optimize the RAM settings. I'm sure there's some more advanced things that are going on as well. I don't. Let's see here. I'm making sure to put everything on my D drive just to so I can. It's a lot easier to delete later. Oops. Okay, here we go. Win10 Advanced. I can't spell advanced, but that's okay. I'm going to delete it. W10 Advanced. Next. Same settings as before. Next, next, next. Hardware. We can pretty much keep everything like we've been using. There's a lot you could get when you look at some of these settings. You're like, there's a lot more that we can do with it. Again, the intent of the screencast is you're relatively new to using VMware Workstation and you just want to get a Windows 10 machine created. Finish. Okay. Let's turn it on. It boots up, and now we're going to be really unimpressive. There's no operating system, and I never told this virtual machine what to use for installation media. So I'm going to have to go. It's going to sit here for a while, and then eventually say like no operating system found. And that's what you'd see on a physical machine too, with no if you forgot to put the install disk in. So we have to go under settings here, and I have to say use an ISO image. And I think I put that in my W10. Yep, there's my Windows 10 ISO. Okay, so now that I've put a DVD-ROM, if you want to think a DVD, into my virtual machine's DVD drive, or actually, so we've mapped an ISO to this virtual machine. Now we can say VM, reset. You sure? Yep. Now it's going to boot up. And we're booting up off our Windows 10 installation disk. And I'll hang around for this for a little bit. I'll hit the pause button, and so you don't have to wait and watch this to happen. Watch this thing spin around, right? Okay, so that just took like 30 seconds. First screen you see is the language. Well, we're English. Keyboard US. Next. Repair your computer. So when you boot off a Windows 10 DVD, you can actually select the repair option to try to use the utilities or the files on your Windows 10 DVD to recover or save your Windows 10 install. But we're just going to install it. This installation does not have the VMware tools installed, so when it's all done, I would have to go under VMware and hit install VMware tools. So I would do this at the end of my installation. Product key, I don't have one. We're not so lucky in the server classes. You have to put a product key in when installing Server 2012. Okay, so I'm not doing an upgrade. A lot of times when you boot off a Windows 10 DVD, you've already got let's say a copy of Windows 7 or 8 if you're on your machine, but this is a fresh install, so we will pick custom. I guess we're advanced. One of the things you do that you can do on a disk is you can partition it. So let's say, for example, that instead of having a 60 gigabyte disk, I want to have two partitions. I want to have one disk, and I'm going to create a 20 gigabyte. Oh, that's terrible. I'll create a 40 gigabyte partition for my operating system, and the other 20 gigabyte partition I'll use later. So new. Let's make a 40,000 megabyte or 40 gigabyte partition. Okay. Getting there. I'll pause it for a second. I don't know why. There it goes. All right. So I now have a 40 gigabyte partition that I'm going to install my OS on. You also see that this happened. This started in Windows 7, but it does create a system, this like system reserved partition here that's has information about booting up your computer. So some people you can delete this if you really want to. That's a mistake. We'll leave it and let's install. And just real quick on the system partition also. I mean, so essentially it contains the boot manager for when your machine boots up. Uh, Startup files, and also if you ever decide to use BitLocker for encrypting the contents of your hard disk, it would use that some of that information would be stored in the system partition. So there it is. This came out in Windows 7. It's used it in Server 2012 as well, and Server 2008. It's just a partition you live with. Next, so I'm installing it in this 40 gigabyte partition here. And now, just like you would expect to see on a physical machine during the install, you have to wait for it to copy the files from the DVD off to your hard disk. So I will pause it. All right, well, about 5 minutes, 10 minutes have gone by, and we're kind of getting close to wrapping up the install. We will use Express Settings. Well, that's thinking. We can take a look here, and I'll just show you that we still have to install VMware Tools. It's grayed out. We have to wait for our Windows 10 to complete the installation, and then we would click on the Install VMware Tools. Next screen that came up is, who's going to use this PC. We saw the same thing during in the easy install, and I used admin. If you notice your mouse is kind of laggy, or you have to, this is just because we haven't installed VMware Tools yet. All right, our password hint. There we go. All right, well, we're almost done with the installation. We're now in Windows 10. I thought I'd show you that. Let's see here. Let's look at the computer real quick, disk management, and we'll look at the device manager next. So, during the install, I created a 40 gigabyte partition. Here it is. There's 20 gigabytes that are unpartitioned, so I could, right click and create some additional partitions here. We also see our system partition, which has our boot files in it. So don't delete it, right? Device manager. We haven't installed VMware Tools, so if I look at the display adapter, it's just got some generic display adapter in there. After we install VMware Tools, we'll see a different display adapter. We'll also see that some of these other issues are taken care of as well. There's some kind of driver issue with the base system device, whatever that is. So VMware Tools will take care of that. I'm going to reboot the machine and then we'll see about wrapping it up. So there's a few ways to restart your machine. You could do it the Windows way. The Windows way, restart, or I can do it the VMware way and just say restart. So VMware knows how to restart a Windows client, a Linux client, etc. If you're doing, you can do these same things on a Mac running VMware Fusion. The one cool thing then is you could also create a Windows 10 Mac VM as well. You cannot make a Mac VM on VMware Workstation on a Windows machine. All right, this recording is almost done. So my Windows 10 machine has rebooted. And what I just wanted to show you now is I can select install VMware Tools. Really what this does is this just maps an ISO of the VMware Tools to the virtual machine's DVD-ROM drive. And it kind of auto runs and it just does an install, reboots again, and after that your machine works better. As mentioned earlier on, things like better video card driver. You can copy and paste stuff from your host computer onto your virtual machine. Time synchronization. There's other benefits as well. So there's no reason to not install VMware tools. So we're picking install VMware tools. We wait a few minutes and reboot later, and we'll have a VM that's just ready to go for class. So I hope this was helpful. VMware is an amazing product, and it really helps you in IT. It gives you the opportunity to learn to experiment with a number of different operating systems. So I thank you for taking the time to watch this, and I hope it was helpful. Have a great day. Bye.